answers. ABC Election Night Live.
Welcome back to What Matters This Week. I'm Lauren Maloney. Joining us this Sunday is Assistant Political Science Professor from UVM, Alex Garlick. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure to be here.
Let's start with the Puerto Rico comment and the fallout from it when we talk about the presidential election. And by that, I mean what the comedian said last Sunday and then the president's garbage comment that came just a few days ago. It definitely dominated the headlines. But did any part of it change minds or sway anyone here?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to change anyone's vote this close to the election. But to the extent that the Trump campaign is concerned, they did try to walk the comments back. And Donald Trump said he had never heard of the comedian who spoke at his own rally. So that's a sign that they're probably concerned. And the reason they might be concerned is that Puerto Ricans are a pretty pivotal voting bloc, both in Pennsylvania, but also in Florida, where there's a statewide Senate election that matters a great deal for control of the Senate. So the Trump campaign appears to be concerned.
What about the comments? You and I are talking on Thursday, and the comments that came recently from Donald Trump that said he was going to protect women whether they like it or not.
Well, I think that while that might not be an artful saying, it is indicative of the fact that women are a voting bloc that could go in either direction and potentially control this election. Ever since the Dobbs versus Jackson decision in 2022, abortion has been at top of mind for voters, and in some cases has surprised pundits on which direction the elections go. I'm thinking about statewide questions that were in Kansas or Montana. And so women's issues are important, and Donald Trump cannot give up women's votes. And so while his message to women is certainly different than the pitch that Kamala Harris is making to women, and hers is based around more ideas of reproductive freedom, it's clear that both campaigns really need to get those votes.
Has there been a so-called October surprise? And if so, what was it?
This year, we've had surprises in June, July, August. So I don't know how much more surprised everyone could be. To the extent that I think there's a surprise to be had here, it's the fact that voters are still learning about Kamala Harris. She only became the nominee in mid-August. In a typical election cycle, usually the nominee is known 8 or 9 months in advance. So while close watchers of politics like you and I and the watchers of your program might have a good sense of who Kamala Harris is, I think there's many voters who are still learning about her. And that might be reflected in the polls.
And let's talk about the polls. You told our Matt Holderman this week that polls may be overcorrecting because of how just about everyone underestimated former President Trump in 2016. Can you explain this to our viewers?
Yes. So in 2016, the polls underestimated Donald Trump's support. And in 2020, even though the pollsters mostly predicted Biden would win and he won, they actually underestimated Donald Trump's support to a larger extent. So the pollsters have a very difficult task in front of them this year. Usually, pollsters rely on random sampling to take a small sample of respondents and project what the larger electorate is going to do. But people don't answer their phones for pollsters anymore, and they're mostly getting their responses online. So instead of relying on random sampling to model the electorate, the pollsters have been trying to ask people who they voted for the last time and weight their responses to make sure they're not underestimating Donald Trump. So as far as I understand, the pollsters are giving us their best estimate of what the electorate will do. But it appears to me that this includes potentially overestimating support for Donald Trump. So while in all likelihood it's going to be a close election, if it was going to be off, I think there's a chance that this could be a comfortable Kamala Harris victory.
You're not the first person who said that when it comes to, these polls may be overestimating a bit because of what happened, the last two cycles. So I have heard that. Let's talk about something else some of us have heard about. There's talk about this red mirage or the blue shift. And these usually happen early on in the night when it comes to when the results come in. Can you explain what exactly these mean?
Yeah, the red mirage was a major phenomenon in 2020 when Democrats had been encouraged to early vote and vote by mail, and Republicans were encouraging their supporters to vote in person on Election Day. And so the in-person votes on Election Day, despite taking place later, actually get counted quicker because they're already in the voting machines, and then the mail ballots were manually tabulated. So earlier in the night, it looked like things were doing better for Republicans. This time around, I would not anticipate the same thing happening because Republicans have been encouraging their supporters to vote early and vote by mail. Donald Trump himself has eased up on his prior criticism of these vote methods. So I would not expect the red mirage to happen in the same way. That being said, there's still some very important states that are in the Eastern time zone that might be counted quickly or might not be counted quickly. Pennsylvania has a state law that they are not allowed to open their mail ballots until the polls have closed at 8 p.m. Therefore, if Pennsylvania is a pivotal state, it's going to be a long night for both sides to wait.
And we're waiting on those 19 electoral college votes in Pennsylvania. So let's talk about surrogates if we can for a second. A lot of celebrities coming forward and going to rallies for Kamala Harris, maybe less so with Donald Trump, although he's had Hulk Hogan appear, I think, twice.
Well, he's a celebrity himself, too.
Yeah, he is, sure. Do these, usually endorsements don't hit well to the common person sitting at home, but I wonder if celebrity endorsements make any difference.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I do not think that celebrities are able to tell people what to think about politics. However, they can tell people what to think about. And what I mean about that is celebrities with large followings, particularly with younger voters who are lower propensity voters and might not be paying as much attention, if they're getting alerted to the election in the last couple of days here, it could change their voting behavior in terms of registration or actually turning out. And going back to the Puerto Rico comments we talked about earlier, there's been some really notable Puerto Rican celebrities like Bad Bunny or J-Lo who have been talking about the election to their really large followings. And these are people that don't usually get involved in politics. So if they are communicating to their followings and helping people understand what the rules are about when to vote and how to vote, maybe we could see an impact when it comes to turnout.
Nikki Haley won the primary in Vermont back in March. However, President Trump has not yet used her, and maybe he will. Again, you and I are talking on Thursday, and we don't know what the next, 5 days or so will be. But are you surprised that he hasn't tapped her for a rally? And when it comes to her voters, is that part of the undecided group that both campaigns are still after?
I'm not particularly surprised he hasn't tapped her too much because Donald Trump was very upset with Nikki Haley earlier in the year and made a number of disparaging comments about her. Even though she came out to support him at the Republican National Convention, we haven't seen much from Nikki Haley since. And I think Nikki Haley is a bit of an avatar for one of the most important groups in this election, which is disaffected Republicans or moderate Republicans in general. These voters are being heavily courted by Kamala Harris right now. I would say Kamala Harris's entire closing argument is generally aimed at these voters. And this is evidenced by her bringing Liz Cheney on campaign with her. And these voters who are maybe more moderate or maybe were concerned about January 6th and are on the fence but don't usually vote for Democrats, this is going to be the key group that Kamala Harris is trying to pull over at the last second. In terms of how Donald Trump keeps them on the Republican side, it's not really clear to me. It doesn't really look like he's moderating his message much at the end.
Let's bring things home to Vermont for the final question, if I can. If this state sees any surprise in terms of the races that are happening on Tuesday, where do you expect it to happen?
Oh, well, to think about the statewide elections in general, both Republican Governor Phil Scott looks like he's cruising to re-election. Democratic Congresswoman Becca Balint is looking good for re-election, and Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders. In terms of what a surprise could be, I don't know. I would say that while Bernie Sanders is really well liked across the state of Vermont, in a way that really transcends his ideological positions, people seem to have a personal connection for Bernie. There seems to be a bit of a groundswell of questioning his decision to run for re-election at age 83. I live in Burlington, and there's a number of signs around Burlington. I don't know who put them out, asking about term limits for U.S. senators. And that gives me a sense that there might be some people who are wondering about how long Bernie Sanders' stay in D.C. is going to go. However, I don't think it's going to get cut short by this election.
Okay, yeah, I have seen those signs within the past, and it seems like the political signs in general in the past 2 weeks have skyrocketed, right?
Oh, they're always out there. And the candidate that gets more signs than votes, I think, is U.S. Senate candidate Gerald Malloy from the Republican Party. Maybe it's because his signs are so notable with the scary white eagle, but his signs are certainly out there.
Just a few days to go, that's for sure, until we count the votes. Alex Garlick, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Lauren.